What's up, everybody? Chris here. Welcome back to Amateur Guitar Nerd. And just wanted to take a few minutes here, do a quick little video on something that I've really been thinking about lately. And that is just, 5 quick tips on things that, I really wish I would have known when I first got started playing about 8 years ago. I was a late starter, didn't start till I was 30. Jumped in with Rocksmith and kind of did the self-taught thing for a long time, right? But, a few things here that I wish I would have known back earlier on in my journey that I think would have really helped me along. And then a couple of tips that I've gotten over the past year that I think really will help other folks like me, that are out there that maybe aren't aware of them, that, could implore some easy, fairly inexpensive tricks and tips to get better sound out of their systems, out of their rigs, because I know that there were things that I did not know that ultimately have really helped me out a lot. So, before I jump in here, just put out the classic YouTube disclaimer. I'm not affiliated with any of the brands that I'm going to talk about. These are just things that I have bought myself, used myself, and really enjoyed or found useful at different parts of my journey. And so I just figured I'd share these in case anybody else out there might get use out of them as well. So, you know, honestly, the other thing to put out here is like, I'm not going to go into every single detail of every single piece of equipment or every single tip that I give here. I'm not a professional guitarist. I'm not a professional YouTuber. I'm just an enthusiast. And so want to keep it a little bit more high level, keep it a little bit quicker video. But definitely keep in mind that there are tons of great videos out there, so if you see anything that I share here today, I definitely encourage you to go out there and find some of the other experts that can, really help you get the details and the nitty gritty of whatever it is you might want to be learning about. So, just throw it out there. I'm more of the regular guy who just plays at home and trial and error, right? Find myself to where I'm at. So, tip number one here, and sometimes this goes without saying, but it really is the most important thing: consistency above all else. I really, really believe that there is no substitute for just putting your hands on your instrument, right? Picking up that guitar every single day or whatever instrument it is that you're playing. But in this case, we're going to talk about guitars. Just practicing, building those, hand to mind connections, those neural connections, is absolutely invaluable no matter what you're doing. And it really, really applies to learning an instrument, learning the guitar. So I tell everybody from my 65-year-old mother-in-law down to my 10-year-old nephew, both who have started instruments for the first time in their lives just recently, the number one thing is whether you have 5 minutes a day or 5 hours or anywhere in between, just try to put your hands on the instrument. And, every day that you'll get 0.1% better. And as those days adds up, you'll find yourself eventually able to play the instrument better than you at least ever thought. I am no expert, but I have just always tried to play as much as possible. Excuse me. And so, all these years later, I feel like I'm definitely more capable than I ever thought I would be, right? So, number one, there's no substitution for practice. So just try to put it on. Give yourself a lot of grace. If you miss days, no big deal. Just try to put that instrument in your hands as much as possible. Tip number two, it really is not about your gear, right? It took me a long time to really learn this lesson. I always thought, it's my $99 guitar that I started out with that just wasn't why I could sound good. Or, it was this, digital combo amp that I had early on for my first amp, right? It's not a tube amp, it's why I don't sound good, right? Like, and there is a little bit of truth to the gear you have. In my personal humble experience, I'd say it's something like 90% skill and 10% gear. But at the end of the day, it really, really is more about the player and the skill level and what you got in those hands, right? I mean, you can go find videos online of people like Zach Wild playing, Hello Kitty guitars and toy guitars and things like that, and they're just shredding it at a incredible level, right? So at the end of the day, don't necessarily chase gear, even though I am going to talk about a couple of pieces of gear here as part of these top fives as well. But find the right gear for you, and then just remember that if you practice and you keep getting better, you'll be able to turn any gear into something that just sounds amazing. And there's lots of examples of that if you go catch interviews and things like that of many of your favorite guitarists, your favorite bands. You will see that a lot of them just kind of jumped in and made it happen with whatever they had, and not some $5,000 guitar that just was touched by God or something like that, right? So just keep it in mind. There are pieces of gear that can definitely help you. We're going to talk about some of those here in a minute, but ultimately, trust in yourself, put the work in your hands, and you'll make it happen over time. So with that now, switching focus, getting those out of the way, I do want to talk about gear from the next 3 points here. So these were all things that I really had no idea about. There were things that I was making kind of honest mistakes about because I didn't have anybody around at the time for my first number of years that could knock me on the head and be like, Chris, you're really getting this all wrong, or you should do this. It was just a lot of me and YouTube and just figuring it out, trial and error, buying gear, testing things out. But my third tip here is just to make sure you're giving your amp enough juice. You can dial in all the settings, the lows, the mids, the highs, all you want. But really, if you aren't giving it enough gain, you're not giving enough master volume, some of those parts of your amp that really just help it breathe, help it open up, even though it is going to get a little louder, right? But you really got to make sure that you're giving it enough headroom or oomph, if you will, to really sing the way you want it to sing. And I know that's a little bit subjective, right? But what I found for me was I had spent all this time, dialing in the lows, the mids, the highs, but I was really scared of the volume because I'm playing in, this is a bedroom in a single family home. Beforehand, I spent years playing in an open loft in a single family home. So I was really cognizant of not blowing out my wife, not blowing out the people around me, right? And so I was constantly keeping that master volume down. I was keeping that gain down. And ultimately, when I took some lessons with a really great guy out of Nashville last year, he was able to use his better trained ear and help me understand that I really was limiting the sounds I could get. I was limiting my amp by not giving it enough headroom to really breathe and kind of find that sweet spot that every amp has. And once I was able to do that, it really, really helped open everything up. I immediately got better tone, and that was one of the big things, right, is you could probably already get better tone out of the amp you have, right, out of the gear you have, by just making sure that you're a little more dialed in with those settings, play around with them a little bit more, and don't be afraid to let them breathe, right? Give them that power that they need and they are built for to really bring your playing to life. And, with that, I did come across a few opportunities for controlling the master volume, right? You can get things like a two notes captor, right, which I have back here, that does a lot of different things, but one of the things is that you can use it as an attenuator, right, where it'll just take whatever signal you're pumping out, so you can dial in your amp and your pedals all, exactly how you want, and it'll drop it 20 decibels right off the bat before it pushes it to your speaker. So you can do pretty much anything you want on your gear, and then you're going to come out with a lower setting, or a lower volume, if you will, lower decibels from your speaker. And so that was a big help. It was a touch of an investment, but it was a big help. But the other thing you can do that's a little bit simpler, I've found, is the little JHS little black amp box here. You can plug into your effects loop, and this will actually work here just as a straight up kind of master volume, if you will. And I thought that that was pretty cool. And so I used that for a little while and still have this on hand in case I ever need it in the future. But this thing, I want to say it was around like 80 bucks, 100 bucks, something like that. Could be a little off there. It's been a while, but it was a cool little solution there. If you're just looking for how can I juice up my amp, really get it where I want, and then just have that ability to crank it or roll it off right here, that's an option I would look at is the JHS little black amp box. All right, keep it on here. Tip number 4. This was a cool one that I thought, and I think a lot of people will relate to this or have the aha moment that I did, but use an always on delay. Whether it's in a modeling rig that you're setting up or on your pedal board, find a way to work in a delay. It can be analog, it can be digital, whatever you prefer. And I would really suggest here something that's inexpensive for this purpose, right? But use it always on delay. And where that was introduced to me was I was chasing tone, and I just really didn't feel like I was getting close to the tones that I hear on all my favorite records, right? I was like, I'm getting pretty good tone all in all when I started adjusting things, but I still just wasn't quite happy. It felt a little empty. It felt a little hollow. And my teacher at the time, once again, with his better trained ear and knowledge, he recommended to me that, a lot of guys, a lot of professional guitarists, a lot of YouTubers, things like that, right, they will use an always on delay. And essentially what they're doing is not, having it on to where it's doing the classic delay effect of, continuously repeating a signal, right, with a little bit of that gap in between, G, 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 whatever it may be, right? But just having something there in the effects loop that is just barely on, probably like 30 to 50 range on the range of how much you can turn a delay on. And so when you do that, it really makes your signal coming through sound very, I won't say very, it just sounds a lot thicker. It sounds a lot fuller. It sounds like you might have a second guitar playing right there with you, right? Which is what a lot of professional musicians have. I've come to understand that, folks like Metallica and, different bands out there, that they're multi-tracking everything. So even though you as a listener hear, one sound, or you think it's one guitar track, right? Rhythm and then one for lead, it really could be 2, 3, 4, 6, however many times they wanted to track that song and lay it over top of each other to create this really full, robust sound. And it's hard to chase that if you're just one guitarist with one rig in a home, right? So, he suggested an always on delay. And so I went out and for me, this was perfect for something like this on the pedal board, and got a Donner, I think this is, the Yellow Fall analog delay. Pretty good ratings. I think it was like 35 bucks. Super cheap, right? If it's just going to sit there and be on, didn't need to have the greatest, echo effects and flashbacks and all that stuff, right? Feedbacks and all that stuff. But you can see I pretty much keep it, right around like quarter turn, maybe a little bit more than a quarter turn, just barely on. So it's just barely mimicking your signal without actually having a delay, a gap in between. So that alone was an immediate jump in tone for me, right? Like, I had adjusted my amp settings, and then throwing that in there, especially playing blues and some of that more soulful stuff. I mean, I really feel like it warmed up everything, it thickened up everything, and you don't have to spend $100, $200, $300 on a pedal for that. You can throw them in to your digital rigs if you have something like a Tone Master Pro or whatever else, type software. But for 35 bucks right into your actual rig, I really think that this has actually worked pretty well. So just my suggestion there. And then wrapping up here, tip number 5 is more something that I've been kind of messing around with and learning recently. So I'm definitely not an expert. I'm still learning a lot here, but I did want to add it in here because in this vein of how you can kind of easily get a better tone, I really felt like this was something that I'm seeing immediate results with. And once again, isn't a super expensive thing. There's lots of expensive options, but you can do this really inexpensively once again, all the digital stuff obviously has EQ pedals and even, you know, master EQs and everything like that that you can mess with, which is great. Makes it super easy. That's kind of how I got into this. But then I added a EQ pedal to my signal chain and have been playing with that and have been immediately seeing the benefits. And so, you know, if you think about with your signal, you know, a lot of people think about sound as kind of just one wave that's going along, and really it's more like a braided wave of multiple different frequencies coming out of your voice or, you know, something that you make sound with or a guitar, right? It's not just a solid, you know, just one single linear line that's going. It's a variety, and you've got, you know, an audio band for low frequencies. You got multiples, really. You've got multiples for mid frequencies. You've got multiple for highs. And so, you know, when you're crafting your tone, if you get something like a basic EQ pedal or use a master EQ in a digital audio software, whatever it may be, right, you can come in here and specifically manipulate those bands. So, you know, do you want to kind of kick the bass up on your amp, but then drop some of the lows, you know, in the actual signal to get some really cool tight sounds that might still give you that chug? You can do that here and really dial it in and mess with, you know, do you want to boost all the mids? Do you want to drop all the mids? Do you want really high treble? You know, it's really, really cool and really lets you take control over what it is that you're putting out through your speakers. And so, you know, this was another thing, Behringer graphic equalizer, got it off Amazon. This, I think, was even cheaper than the Donner delay. I think this was like 25 bucks. You know, really inexpensive, really easy to add to a pedal chain and play around with. So, you know, really for the two, the always on delay, you know, if you go that route and the equalizer, I think you're looking at like 60 bucks out the door, two pedals that could just really elevate your tone right away, even at, you know, even just at the house. So these were all things I really wish I would have known before. I really think that they're helping me now. I really hope that they help somebody out there that's watching this. And, you know, be sure to let me know in the comments. Is it something about the amp settings, practicing, delay pedals, or EQs that you are familiar with or curious about? Whatever it may be, throw it in the comments. We can have a discussion about it. But I definitely appreciate everybody watching the video, and I'll catch you the next time.